bill introduced by Mr. Brady, the Death Tax Repeal Act. Mr. Brady, you are now recognized for an opening statement on your bill.
Thank you, Chairman Ryan. I want to thank my Democrat co-sponsor, leader, Congressman Sanford Bishop of Georgia, for his leadership to repeal the death tax and his belief that you shouldn't punish success, as well as my colleague, Representative Christy Noem, and Congressman Mac Thornberry, a long-time champion. Can you imagine working a family ranch for 5 generations, more than a century, only to be forced to sell 2/3 of it to satisfy the death tax? Can you imagine decades of hard work building your family-owned business, only upon your death, Uncle Sam swoops in and demands nearly half the nest egg you've spent a lifetime building? These examples are real and are in this room today. The death tax is the wrong tax at the wrong time and hurts the wrong people. It's the number one reason why family-owned businesses aren't passed down to the next generation. It is Washington's most immoral and calculated attack on the American dream. Since the estate tax was temporarily imposed in 1916 to help pay for World War I, by every measure it's failed to achieve the purposes its supporters champion. It's robbed America's economy of $1.1 trillion in capital investment. It generates little annual revenue, less than enough to cover one day of Washington spending. It hurts the economy, encourages income inequality, and fails to meet any basic standard of fairness. Ironically, studies prove that our economy and federal tax revenues would grow faster if the death tax were simply abolished. The George Soros, Bill Gates, and Warren Buffetts of the world, with their legions of lawyers and tax planners, won't pay the death tax. As we heard from our witnesses at Chairman Reichert's recent hearing, this tax burden falls on family-owned farms, on businesses and ranches. They are not Paris Hilton or the robber barons of Teddy Roosevelt days as portrayed by our Democrat friends. These are the hard-working, risk-taking, and determined Americans, often forced back to the bank for a loan or cruelly forced to sell off their land and business to satisfy the IRS. The death tax is especially destructive to women and minority-owned businesses in America who are building wealth often for the first time. Mr. Bob Johnson, the founder of BET Television, recently wrote to this committee, the death tax continues to pose a serious threat to the likelihood that present-day African-American-owned businesses can be preserved as part of a family's long-term legacy. A study by Boston College professors estimate the death tax could rob African-American households of up to $250 billion of wealth over the first half of this century. Death tax supporters insist it's the key to our democracy, a necessary remedy to income inequality. But former Federal Reserve Vice Chairman Alan Blinder found that only 2% of income inequality can be explained by inherited wealth. Turns out Americans build their prosperity from the ground up. Congress's own Joint Economic Committee reported that the death tax motivates wealth holders to reduce savings and increase spending now rather than pass it on to the next generation. This actually increases the consumption gap between the wealthy and poor. Today, death tax supporters may propose a special use valuation alternative to somehow exempt farms, ranches, and small businesses from the death tax. We tried this approach before in 1997. It just heaped additional burdens and complexity on family businesses and tied them up in red tapes for years after death. As award-winning Yale professors Grates and Shapiro concluded, everyone now agrees this was a complete and utter failure. Look, no more gimmicks. Our economy is suffering through a disappointing recovery, missing more than 5 million jobs. We need American entrepreneurs and family-owned businesses to close that serious jobs gap. But as our committee witnesses made clear, instead of hiring more workers, investing in their businesses, the death tax diverts their precious dollars and time to estate planning, millions of dollars and millions of hours. Imagine if all that could have been invested in new jobs and business opportunities. Mr. Chairman, let's give our children back their shot at the American dream and a better nation than the one we inherited. I urge my colleagues to work with me in ending the death tax once and for all. I yield back.
Mr. McDermott, you are recognized for an opening statement on the bill.